Welcome to the deep dive. We take detailed source materials today. It's the summary of a novel, basically its narrative blueprint, and we really pull apart the core emotional knowledge. The goal is for you to grasp the whole structure, the meaning, everything essential. So, today's mission, Debbie Macomber's 2022 novel, The Best Is Yet to Come. We're dissecting the architecture of this healing story. And this isn't, just a straightforward romance. It's built on something deeper, this fundamental tension, really.
Yeah.
Profound loss versus the absolute need for renewal.
Exactly. That tension is the heart of it.
It explores what happens when people have to move beyond just surviving tragedy and start, actively seeking a fresh start, a full life.
And that's the engine driving the whole book.
Yeah.
When you look at the source material, the detailed summary covering plot, setting, characters, the explicit themes, it's really a masterclass in emotional engineering.
A roadmap, like you said.
Yeah, a roadmap built specifically to guide these two very isolated people towards connection, towards light, and ultimately, towards forgiving themselves. And the landscape gets set up right away. Wishing Tree, Washington. Even the name kind of hints at its role, right?
Wishing Tree, yeah.
And then our protagonists, Hope Godwin, Kate Lincoln Jr. The sources are clear. They both show up carrying these huge emotional psychological burdens, deficits, really. And these have to be dealt with before they can move forward at all.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with Hope Godwin's burden. To really get the scale of her renewal later, we need to understand the weight she's carrying at the start. So, Section 1, the weight of grief, Hope Godwin's burden.
Right. Her reason for moving to Wishing Tree, it stems from this very specific, very complex tragedy. The catalyst is her twin brother, Ethan. He died serving in Afghanistan.
And that's not just any loss, a twin. That's a primal bond.
It is. It's the rupture of that unique bond, and it's compounded by the circumstances of military death. That often brings its own societal weight, maybe even an existential crisis for the survivor.
And the summary makes it clear her pain isn't superficial. It says she's racked with guilt and grief. We should probably linger on that wording. The guilt seems almost more significant than the grief initially.
I think that's right. It's a fascinating psychological mechanism. Grief, it's mourning something external, the person's gone. But guilt is internal punishment. It suggests she feels she failed him somehow, or maybe even that she owes his death, well, a lifetime of her own unhappiness as penance.
Wow.
So when you layer that kind of self-blame onto losing a twin, the barrier to recovery is just massive. She's not just sad. She's actively punishing herself for being the one who lived.
That really does elevate the challenge for her. She has to find a way to forgive herself before she can truly heal the grief itself. So how does the narrative show her trying to tackle this? She uses a very specific action-based strategy in Wishing Tree. She takes on two different roles, high school teacher and volunteer at an animal shelter.
And looking at those choices tells us a lot thematically. Why those two seemingly unrelated things? Becoming a teacher. That's a very deliberate, symbolic move towards the future. Her life was shattered by the past, by Ethan's death. Teaching forces her to invest energy, intellect into the next generation's potential. It's like the author structurally reorienting her focus away from backward-looking pain toward the forward-looking hope.
And the animal shelter work. That feels like the other side of the coin.
Exactly. It provides a kind of emotional safety net. Shelter animals, especially one like Shadow, who we'll get to, who's been mistreated, they need immediate, unconditional compassion. But they don't demand complex emotional give and take or trigger painful memories in the same way human interaction might. It's high reward, low risk emotionally. She gets to practice empathy for an innocent creature without having to articulate her own complex pain or guilt to another person yet.
That makes sense. A stepping stone.
A crucial one. The source frames her healing attempt through these acts of service, almost self-sacrifice. And the deeper meaning for you, the listener, is understanding just how vital her starting point is, this internal war rooted in survivor's guilt. The heavier her initial burden, the more powerful and, frankly, satisfying her journey towards self-forgiveness ultimately feels for the reader.
That definitely sets the stage, and it provides a really interesting contrast to our second protagonist, Kate Lincoln Jr. His burden feels less spectral, more defined by real-world actions and shame. Let's shift to Section 2. The need for redemption, Kate Lincoln Jr.'s isolation.
Right. If Hope is isolated by this profound internal grief, Kate is isolated by something much more visible, social stigma. From his past actions, we know he's a former soldier. That carries implied weight service, maybe trauma. But immediately that's contrasted, complicated by his present status. He's an ex-convict just out of prison,
That juxtaposition is really potent, structurally. Someone who served, dedicated to duty, now facing incarceration, and the stigma that comes with it. Deep alienation. Do we know what landed him there? The specific mistake?
We do. The summary gives the exact detail, and it feels like a very specific narrative choice.
Mm-hmm.
His conviction was for a bar fight gone wrong.
Okay, a bar fight gone wrong. Why is that detail significant?
Well, I think it's incredibly important for keeping his redemption arc plausible, for keeping the reader invested in him. If his crime had been, say, embezzlement or something premeditated, chronic,
Yeah.
it might be harder to maintain that compassion.
Right.
The bar fight gone wrong suggests something rooted in maybe impulsivity, bad judgment, maybe even a reaction under stress, rather than inherent malice or a pattern of criminality. It lets the author acknowledge the seriousness. Prison is serious, but ensures we still see his core character as redeemable. The focus stays on redemption, not just rehabilitation.
That's a key distinction. So his emotional weight is this dual thing. The potential trauma from being a soldier,
Right.
layered with the very public social shame of being an ex-con.
His guilt isn't just about the fight itself, but the massive fallout, the consequences for his life, his relationship.
Absolutely. And the direct result of all this is withdrawal, deep withdrawal.
The sources say he's haunted by his own past, and crucially, estranged from his family. That's a huge choice by the character, right? He hasn't just moved away. He's cut off his primary support system. He deliberately keeps to himself. It tells us he basically believes he's lost his right to be accepted, to have that family love.
It's such a powerful parallel with Hope. I really need to highlight that. Both of them start out in this extreme state of self-imposed exile. Hope's is internal, guilt-driven. Cade's is external, shame-driven. Two islands, basically, each convinced they have to pay for their pasts alone.
And that level of isolation, that deep, well, it means the author can't just have them accidentally bump into each other at the grocery store and fall in love that wouldn't feel earned. The story needs something compelling, something external that doesn't feel contrived to break through those walls they've built.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3. This is where the supporting elements come in to do that heavy lifting, to forge that connection. Section 3. The catalyst of connection, Shadow, and Wishing Tree.
Okay, let's talk about Shadow, the dog. You could argue he's the most vital secondary character. He's the mechanism for change.
How so?
Well, Shadow is introduced as this mistreated dog. He embodies suffering in a way that mirrors the humans. Like Hope and Cade, Shadow struggles to trust again. He's been hurt by people. He's deeply wary of connection.
Oh, that parallel pain.
Whatever.
Shadow's vulnerability mirrors Hope's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She can see and respond to the trauma in Shadow in a way she maybe can't acknowledge in herself yet. Bonding with him becomes this safe, low-stakes space for her to reintroduce trust and compassion into her life. The summary even calls it a turning point in her recovery. So the dog is functioning as, well, you might call it a wounded savior trope. By saving the wounded animal, Hope is unconsciously starting to heal her unbroken ability to trust. And purely from a plot perspective, Shadow is the essential link. The source says Shadow leads him, Cade, to Hope. The dog needs care from both of them. Hope at the shelter, Cade as presumably the one who finds or helps him initially. This forces them into proximity, forces cooperation between these two very isolated people.
Right. They're pushed together because they share this responsibility for an innocent third party. It gives them a functional reason, an excuse almost, to lower those defenses they've built up against connecting with other humans.
Precisely. But Shadow's only one part of the equation. The setting itself is just as crucial. It's an enabling condition. We really need to look at Wishing Tree, Washington, as its own character. It actively pushes back against their isolation.
What does the small town offer that maybe a big anonymous city wouldn't?
It offers the antidote to their shame and solitude, this pervasive community warmth and stability. Wishing Tree provides a backdrop of hope, and it's characterized by specific things like warmth and holiday spirit. This isn't just window dressing. This atmosphere is a direct challenge to the corrosive isolation that Hope and Cade have cultivated.
How does that play out practically?
Well, think about Cade, the ex-convict. In a big city, he could hide more easily, sure, but he could also retreat back into solitude much more easily. In Wishing Tree, that warmth, that holiday spirit, it means people notice, people check in, people offer help. It's hard to stay isolated when the community is constantly gently pulling you in.
So the town itself acts like a kind of therapeutic environment.
A therapeutic envelope, yeah. The community warmth doesn't just help the romance bloom. It provides the social scaffolding needed for their individual healing, too.
And this foundation, the shared pain brought together by the dog, happening against the supportive town backdrop, this is what makes their connection feel believable, earned.
Yes, the summary is explicit.
Yeah.
Their bond grows into love through shared pain and compassion. It's not just surface attraction. It's rooted in recognizing deep suffering in each other. That shared vulnerability is the bedrock.
It feels like the narrative really takes its time to justify the romance, to make sure you, the listener, understand it comes from this place of mutual understanding of deep wounds and this willingness to show compassion to someone else, maybe before they can even show it to themselves. Okay, this groundwork is solid. Now we can really dedicate time to the big ideas, the thematic superstructure holding it all up. Let's move into section 4, the heart of this deep dive, unpacking the 4 major thematic pillars identified in the summary.
Let's do it, because the themes are what really elevate this. First up, 4.1, healing and self-forgiveness. This is the core psychological battle. The source material says point blank, both Hope and Cade must confront guilt and grief to move forward.
Let's dig into the difference between Hope's path and Cade's path here. For Hope, the guilt is internal, tied to surviving her twin. How does the story help her make that leap toward forgiving herself?
For Hope, it seems the mechanism is partly about witnessing redemption in others, first Shadow, then Cade. By dedicating herself to nurturing the future through teaching and saving the wounded at the shelter, she's externally demonstrating her own worth, her inherent goodness. And that slowly chips away at the foundation of her self-punishment. Her challenge is cognitive, right? She has to actively rewire her belief that she deserves to suffer. The story provides evidence against her own self-condemnation.
Whereas Cade's challenge, it's tied to something tangible. His shame isn't just a feeling, it's a social and legal fact. He needs to forgive the action and its consequences to rebuild his identity.
Yep. Exactly. For Cade, self-forgiveness seems to come through social reintegration, through being trusted again. He needs the community, and especially Hope, to see him as more than his conviction. The forgiveness he needs is proof that his future potential matters more than his past mistake. He has to accept that serving time was the consequence, but the guilt doesn't have to be a life sentence. Making that internal shift, accepting redemption as possible, that's crucial for him and for their relationship.
And that flows perfectly into the next theme, 4.2, the opportunity of second chances. The novel explicitly emphasizes it's never too late to start again.
Yeah, and the power here is that it's not just an abstract idea. It's embodied by both characters taking huge concrete risks. Hope risks emotional vulnerability by starting over a completely new career, new town where her twin's memory isn't hanging over everything. She's literally rebuilding her life from the ground up.
And Cade, well, as an ex-convict, he is the theme of second chances, walking around in the most challenging context. Society often doesn't grant genuine second chances, right? The stigma lingers long after the debt is paid. So his presence, his attempt to build a life in Wishing Tree, is an active challenge to that resistance. His success becomes proof of the theme itself. Transformation is possible if the environment allows it.
And the genius of the structure, the Macomber structure here, is how their journeys validate each other. Hope believing in Cade helps her believe in her own future. Cade respecting Hope's struggle helps him see his own path to peace. Their love story becomes the evidence that second chances are real and achievable.
Let's move to 4.3. Love, compassion, and connection. The sources stress this isn't just about romance, it's about all human relationships and compassion being vital for recovery.
Right, and we need to notice how the source of compassion is deliberately layered. It starts with that lower-risk connection, the bond with Shadow. The summary specifically says that bond plays a key role in recovery. That's where Hope starts flexing those emotional muscles again. Giving compassion to Shadow makes her more capable of receiving it from Cade and ultimately giving it to herself.
So it's not just person to person, it's like this web of care.
A three-way web, yeah. The animal is the safe bridge, letting Hope risk empathy towards Cade, who's also wounded. It shows that healing needs connection in different forms. Sometimes it's a non-judgmental animal, sometimes it's a supportive neighbor, and finally, maybe it's an intimate partner who truly gets the depth of your pain. Connection isn't just presented as nice to have. It's framed as a necessary therapeutic ingredient. Solitude, let their guilt and shame fester. Connection forces vulnerability, risk-taking, external validation, all essential for growth.
Okay, and the final pillar, 4.4. The enabling role of community. We touched on Wishing True being important, but let's analyze exactly how the small town provides that support structure.
Well, it's the direct opposite of the isolation both characters initially chose. Wishing Tree's vibe, that warmth and holiday spirits, like this constant gentle pressure against their urge to withdraw. The small-town nature means they can't just disappear. They're seen, they're included, they're gently nudged back into belonging.
Especially important for Cade, given his past.
Critically important. In a small, warm community, his efforts to rebuild, to be better, are visible. When the community accepts his genuine efforts, it validates that second chance theme far more powerfully than just his internal thoughts could. The community acts as the external proof of his transformation.
So the community isn't just a pretty backdrop, it's an active requirement for their healing.
A prerequisite, I'd say, especially when dealing with deep shame or guilt. Individual healing seems to need that supportive external environment to counteract the internal pull towards self-exile. The town makes the actions leading to forgiveness possible.
Okay, we've really taken apart the structural and thematic bones of this story. Let's move to section 5. The style, the emotional feel, the how of the storytelling. How does Macomber actually handle these incredibly heavy themes, military death, intense guilt, incarceration?
The source material is very specific here. It uses words like gentle, heartwarming, and emotionally resonant. That's the stylistic promise. It signals that even though the issues are profoundly serious, death, guilt, prison, scroll, the delivery will prioritize comfort, safety, and ultimately, upliftment.
Which fits right into that classic Debbie Macomber style people expect, right?
Exactly. It navigates these painful, traumatic emotions by guaranteeing a satisfying resolution. The gentleness isn't weakness. It's a structural choice. It reassures the reader. No matter how dark it gets for the characters, the author will guide them back to the light.
That management of difficult feelings must be key to the appeal.
I think so. The novel blends romance with themes of renewal. It consciously avoids the maybe raw, sometimes unforgiving grit you might find in purely literary fiction about trauma. Instead, romance is positioned as both the reward for and the proof of successful personal growth. That blend makes these heavy themes accessible and very appealing to readers who are looking for hope after hardship.
Yeah, from a reader's perspective, that promise is the core draw. The suffering hope in Cade endure isn't the end point. It's a difficult, necessary step towards something better. The blend validates the idea that joy can come after devastation.
And the synthesis, the outcome described, confirms this. Their journey proves redemption and second chances are possible. But the real emotional payoff seems to be the discovery that even after immense loss, life can hold unexpected joy. That reinforces the idea that embracing vulnerability ultimately leads to strength and love.
It's a narrative that demands a high price, grief, guilt, prison time, but offers an equally high reward. Love, community, a future. It validates the struggle by making sure it leads somewhere meaningful. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We started with these two protagonists basically defined by isolation, Hope wrestling with survivor's guilt over her twin, Cade dealing with the very public shame of his conviction. And we traced how they connect.
Right. We looked at how the story uses shadow, that wounded savior figure, to force them together, to spark that mutual compassion. And how all of this happens against the backdrop of Wishing Tree, that therapeutic community that actively counters their isolation and supports their healing.
And for you listening, pulling apart these narrative elements gives you that complete structural understanding, not just what happens, but the psychological framework that makes the story resonate.
Exactly. And if we build on that final takeaway, that life can hold unexpected joy even after huge loss, it leaves us with a pretty potent question to think about. We established Hope's guilt was more cognitive, internal, about survival. Cade's shame was more external, actionable, tied to consequences, given those very different burdens. Which act of self-forgiveness do you think the narrative presents as a harder one to achieve? Hope forgiving herself for living when Ethan died, or Cade forgiving himself for the ripple effects of that bar fight? Thinking about that difference in psychological weight based on their unique pasts, well, that's what makes their journey, their redemption, feel so rich.